I'm Sam Walker. I'm the fifth generation of Walker to run Walker and Ling on Western High Street. I've worked up until very recently with my father, Tony Walker. He worked with his father, Peter, and his uncle, Roger, his grandfather, Charles, and before Charles was Samuel Walker, so that's 5 generations. And yes, in the 70s and 80s, there was 4 Walkers working in the shop all together. Can't even imagine what that would have been like. The business was started, well, William Ling had a business in Bath in the 1850s on Milsom Street, which is famous around that time too as a fashionable high street with jollies and lots of other trendy places on it. It was in one of Jane Austen's books, actually, Milsom Street, as a good place to buy parasols. So that's where Walker and Ling started life. Samuel Walker became his store manager in 1880, and they finally put the partnership together in 1892. So it became Walker and Ling first in Bath in 1892. That business seems to have prospered because 8 years later, in 1904, the drapery business of Mr. William Sperring of Weston was acquired, and so they had 2 stores, one in Weston and one in Bath. And the Weston premises was, and with the stock, was valued at £1,470, 5 shillings and 2pence. So even at that time, that would have been quite a lot of money, of course, as you can imagine.
That was megabucks.
Yeah, there is a link to John Lewis, the sister of John Lewis, was involved with the Sperring drapery business before it became Walker and Ling. So, we bought this premises off John Lewis. I think, Weston would have been a really up-and-coming sort of town at that time, and the high street would have been very busy with lots of different shops. Then time moves on. At that time, it would have all been, nothing off the peg. It would have all been bespoke clothing, but really drapers. It's not entirely clear to me what drapery was then, but it's more than just clothing. It would have been fabrics and
haberdashery, all that sort of thing, buttons and zips and bows and ribbons.
Yeah, exactly. So they really would have made everything for your outfits, and probably some for the home as well. And so over the course of 130 years, that's really what we've centred on, is sort of clothing. And over time we have done fashions and fabrics too, curtains and that sort of thing too. So from some of the early photos you can see that the children's wear was quite popular. And the headed stationery that we had from the early part of the 1900s says blouse specialists, gloviers, milliners, drapers, children's outfitters, gentlemen, and so on. It just goes on, glovers, hatters and everything. So I think one day they finally invented the term department store, and that probably made it a lot easier for everybody. So a few years later, in 1908, Charles Walker, Samuel's son, joined the business as a manager and a partner. And so the 2 Walkers ran it together in Weston. And the Bath store carried on with Mr. Ling. Of course, shortly after that time was World War I. Charles served in France with the Royal Garrison Artillery. There's not much in the history books about the involvement with World War I, but obviously it was quite a big, significant national crisis, and the business continued to trade. So I suppose, I imagine they were dealing with a lot of military sort of outfits and possibly even some uniforms from some of the pictures. Certainly the style was very military. So at this time there was about 30 staff. Many of them would have lived in, so the store is still really long, all the way back from the high street, and the back half of the store would have been living accommodation with a soup lady and a tea lady and a canteen and presumably bedrooms, and possibly, not the nicest living conditions. I don't really know.
Is that where the seamstresses and everything would have worked as well?
Exactly. So those say 30 staff living in would have made the costumes and the dresses and sewing and the alterations. That's it. In 1925 then, the founder of the business, Samuel Walker, died, and Charles Walker took over the running of the business, having started in 1908 then, and I think he retired in 1974, so he worked here for a very long time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Here we go. Walker and Ling of Weston-super-Mare, drapers, milliners, ladies and children's outfitters and high-class dressmakers. 21 and 22 High Street, Weston-super-Mare, and at Bath. And the telephone number was 137. Now, the phone number now is 621237. So I think the 137 is still in there.
Still there,
Yeah,
isn't
in
it?
there.
they just added to it as the exchange got bigger.
That's it. And at the bottom of the receipt it says, "We close at 1 o'clock on Thursdays." So this one's even better. Bought of Walker and Ling, costumiers, fancy drapers, milliners, glovers, hosiers, haberdashers, blouse specialist, high-class dressmaking, ladies and children's outfitting. And that outfit from the 29th of April 1910 is for £7, 12 shillings and 10 pence, I think.
Yeah.
Which does sound like a lot.
Yeah.
But it probably was a full outfit. Could have been a suit. Well, it says costume there at the top, and cap, and probably blouse.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it would have
So
been
keep the whole thing, yeah.
Yeah, everything down to your socks.
Yes. So they wouldn't have had any cash on the shop floor at those times, and it was all handwritten receipts. But it wasn't until after the war that we installed the pneumatic tubes, obviously, as machinery got better. So we'll come back to that. There was a building in between times, in between the turn of the century and the 40s. So this building in the picture here is about the 20s, I believe. And it says Agents for Liberty and Jaeger. Okay, so in 1936, W.J. Ling retired, and it was just with Charles Walker, or Charlie Walker. By then, and up until about 1939, the staff had increased to nearly 100 people, presumably most of them not living in, but 100 staff in this building. Yeah, we're about 20 now, so 100 would have been really quite remarkable. Obviously, that was the start of World War II, and so that would have had quite a dramatic impact. None more so than the bomb that fell on the building. The bomb fell on Lance and Lance on 29th of June 1942, and then the fire swept down through this little parade of shops, which all would have been timber and cloth and, in those days, probably, and some brick, I suppose. Stories of my great-grandfather out here with a hose pipe at 4 o'clock in the morning putting out the fire. So, at 1942, his children would have been grown up and would have been, well, possibly fighting, but also, 10 years on, they came to join the business. So, So the oil bomb destroyed the front half of the store, and obviously we couldn't trade out of the building because there's pictures of it in pieces, black charred ash. But we did start trading the very next day out of Coulston's Bazaar with wartime spirit. Yeah. So I think the route was from the back door, which is right on the back of North Street, through to Coulston's Bazaar. So my great uncle Roger, who still pops in quite often, has told me stories of how they used to sort of go around the back access passage. So that was 1942. And the rebuild wasn't really complete until 1958, 59. So there was a good 15 years where the building was half built. But I think after the war, the government sort of decided to rebuild pretty extensively, and the shop had bursaries to rebuild, including the Lamson pneumatic tubes and Weston's first electric passenger lift, which we're very proud of. Still in use today. Marriott Scott, the old lift, and unfortunately, pneumatic tubes died about 3 months ago, but they were until then used every day, and they hadn't been serviced since the 90s. So they hadn't been serviced for 30 years. And all we need is a big engine. We need a big blower, like a leaf blower, and stick it onto the tubes, and then it would work again. But the engine is currently defunct, unfortunately. So that
actual part, then the actual tube, the engineering lump of it is okay.
Yeah, I believe
It's
so.
literally the blower that...
Some of the rubber valves will be shot, but it was working until recently, and it was the engine that clunked, and a bolt must have come loose, and it lost pressure.
Yeah.
So we turned it off. But one day we'll have an enthusiast come in and build us a new one, and maybe it'll work again. But it has been brilliant, and obviously lots of people in Weston will remember the cash tubes flying around the building, clanking through the rafters. So William Ling retired in 1936, and the Bath store was sold in 1950 then. So the Bath stake ended in 1950. In 1952, the passenger lift was installed, and the pneumatic tubes around that time as well. In fact, we have got a receipt from 1952 from when it was installed in amongst the Lamson tubes, which is quite amazing. I like this advert from 1953. Due to enemy action, we have for the past 11 years been carrying on our business in temporary premises of a very inadequate nature. Whilst always endeavouring to give you our closest personal attention, we have been greatly handicapped by lack of space. We hope now to give you that same attention and service in more pleasant surroundings, which will be gradually expanded as building licences permit. Please pay us a visit. All departments now on ground floor, open during the lunch hour, regular deliveries to country districts, and a special feature is our new bra bar. So there we go. There it is, the bra bar. It's my great Uncle Roger. Oh, that's Mrs. Gabriel, who's in some of the adverts as well. He was Mr. Roger, because he wasn't Mr. Walker, he was Mr. Roger, and Mr. Peter was his brother, and Mr. Charles was the dad. My dad was Mr. Tony. My mum, my dad's wife, is Mrs. Tony. His wife is Mrs. Roger, and so my grandmother would have been Mrs. Peter. Just because they couldn't use Walker, and the wives didn't have first names, so it was Mr. Peter and Mrs. Peter.
So your wife is Mrs. Sam then?
Well, officially, so after the war and during the rebuild, Charles' son Peter and Roger joined the business as partners. So at that stage it was Charles, Peter and Roger, and then in 1954 we had a big sort of jubilee for 50 years since the Western store opened in 1904, which by the way was the same year I've learnt as the Grand Pier, and in fact Thatcher's cider.
Oh wow!
So,
I noticed you.
Yeah. 1959 approximately the rebuild was complete, and sort of fast forwarding a bit through the decades now, the firm joined the Association of Independent Stores in 1968. And that's been quite important, really, for our business to be part of a club, of like-minded businesses. In the 60s and 70s, it was many stores. In at the turn of the century, everybody was independent.
Yes.
In the 60s, the independents clubbed together a little bit to fight the bigger stores. And then, unfortunately, it looks increasingly now like the bigger stores have won the day, and the independent stores are dying out. The association's still together, and we're still part of it. And there are still about 100 independent department stores in the country. And I think it could be a bit of a good time for independent department stores. I think it could be a good time for regional high streets. And there's plenty of hope for Weston, I think. So there's no other shops now in these regional high streets. So Charlie was the lead on fabrics, and so bolts of fabrics and measuring cloth. Yeah. Actually, my grandfather Peter was more the accountant up here, and Roger was marketing and came up with the bra bar and the re-merchandising the whole store after the war. Then my father took on linens and later brought on cook shop and housewares. Yeah. And so then I've pursued more the branded fashion with the new brands like Sea Salt and Barber and Superdry. And seen off the cook shop. Undone all his good work of 10 years. But, you have to keep moving. And the benefit of an independent store is you can decide on a Monday to do something, and then by the Tuesday it can be on the way. You don't have to have everything approved by head office. And it's you can be a bit more agile.
The man that came up with the idea is head office. Yeah,
that's it, exactly. Speak to head office, that's right. So we're up to 1973, the day that VAT started in the UK. Is the day that my father Tony started at Walker & Ling. So at that stage it would have been Charles, Peter, Roger and Tony, all 4 walkers in one little building, and I don't even know how they managed. That in fact is the photograph that inspired the regeneration of the store as it is today. That's the first and only real black and white image we got from the rebuild of it as it was. So there we go, that's that. And this is quite a good advert from Friday, April the 27th, 1956, in the illustrious Western Mercury. A new bra? You would never buy a hat without trying it on, would you? In the same way, we recommend that you always have foundation garments properly fitted before buying. Corset fitting requires highly specialised knowledge, and Mrs. Gabriel, our buyer, has that knowledge and many years' experience to go with it. We have brassieres, roll-ons and panties, and so on. Remember, an ill-fitting foundation garment can ruin your entire outfit. And this is quite fun too. Meet the experts in our hosiery department. Experts from Aristock, still in business, and Morley, no longer in business, will be in our store from Wednesday to Saturday. So if you have any nylon problems, now's your chance to meet the experts. And the offer for that celebration day in 1954 was free nylons. A free pair of fully fashioned nylons will be given away with each cash purchase of £5 or over, excepting coats and suits, which will be offered at prices of £10 and over, less £1 discount, at prices of up to £10, less 10% discount. If you can figure that out. I mean, in the 50s, a discount of £10 or 10% was something to chase after.
Absolutely.
Whereas now, adverts tend to have no words in them, just red and a percentage.
That's right, yeah.
And it's usually 50 or more. Okay, so 1976, Charles died on June the 7th, days before his 90th birthday, and he'd never retired.
Oh.
So he joined the business 1908 and retired in 1976.
Wow.
So just short of 70 years working in the
That's
business.
a long time, isn't it?
Yeah. The story is that he used to have a pocket watch, and he used to count the time as the store closed and hurry the customers out because he wanted them out of the store at the end of the day, which I rather like. Yeah, that's it. 1989, Roger Walker retired, and Peter and Tony continued in partnership, and that partnership lasted until 1998 when my grandfather Peter died, and so Tony Walker ran the business from 98 until I started in 2013. And in between those times, 6-day trading was introduced in 1990. That included Monday, not Saturday. So it was the addition of Monday in 1990 that was the unusual one. And now, of course, the world is all geared up for 7-day trading, which we do on occasion when we can muster the courage. But that takes us up to I started in 2013, and Dad retired last November 2021. So now it's just little old me.
So